Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. It's my pleasure to bring you all a showcase of our brandest, newest 4-star character, Lynette. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at how good a level 90 Constellation 0, as well as Constellation 1, Lynette is, with the 4-star weapon, the Sacrificial Sword. Alright, so Lynette is our first 4-star Fontaine character, and yet another Hat Cats enthusiast along with her brother. And with her comes some interesting questions and precedents for the future. On top of that, Lynette is completely free for everyone. My Lynette is using the Sacrificial Sword, and she's using the 4-piece Viridescent Veneer with a focus on crit stats and energy recharge. Her talents are at 9, 9, and 9, and for most of this video she's at Constellation 0, but I will talk about her Constellation 1 later on. We'll go over her kit, her Ousia mechanics, a couple team examples, and her Constellation 1, and finally my thoughts on Lynette at the end. Without any further delays, let's start off as we always do by talking about her kit. Her normal attacks, Rapid Right Sword, deals physical damage at Constellations 1 through 5. Now these physical attacks are obviously going to be completely unremarkable. However, if you would like to see a Hyper Carry Animo Lynette DPS build at Constellation 6, let me know down in the comments below. But for now, we'll move on to her elemental skill, Enigmatic Feint. Her elemental skill is kind of like a baby Yelan's elemental skill, where you can hold it to run for a while. Similar to Yelan's, it also allows you to generate stamina while running. And finally, it is indeed a bit faster than regular double dashing for traversal purposes, and also much more stamina friendly. Now as for using it in combat, it swirls once, and the extra Ousia Damage doesn't swirl. We'll talk a bit more about Ousia Damage later, but if you use her elemental skill a second time in a row, the second E still does swirl, but she doesn't have a second Ousia Damage proc. This is because the Ousia Damage part of her elemental skill has a fixed 10-second cooldown. It generates a very reasonable 4 particles as well, and with the Sacrificial Sword, Lynette is quite reliably able to get 8 animal particles in quick succession. And I almost completely forgot to mention that her elemental skill drains some HP and just heals it back up. At the moment, it's not all that useful unless you want to use her as a main DPS character at Constellation 6 with the Marichasi Hunter. Perhaps these HP draining mechanics will have a bigger impact in the future though, but only time will tell. Anyway, we can move on to her elemental burst, Magic Trick, Astonishing Shift. Lynette is similar to her brother in that she is also a cat hat enthusiast. It taunts nearby enemies and is supposedly has different infusion priority of Cryo, Pyro, Hydro, and Electro, although I wasn't able to personally verify or test this. The burst itself does an initial hit, followed by 11 ticks of animo damage, and then followed by 5 infused cat hat projectiles. In total, her burst swirls 5 times and applies the infused element 3 times. The AoE on it is reasonable, and as we can see, it hits all enemies within its radius. And also very importantly, Lynette's elemental burst doesn't snapshot. And lastly, when she uses her elemental burst, she provides a modest 8 to 20% attack buff to your team depending on the number of elements on your team. Let's now take a look at her entire kit in action with an energy recharge focused damage build. Well, her damage is debatably non-negligible, but it's clear to see that at Constellation 0, Lynette is not really meant to be a DPS character. Alright, so we've taken a look at her entire kit. It's time to talk about why she exists and why she's completely free for everyone. It's clear that Lynette's damage amplification and grouping pale in comparison to Kazuha and Sucrose. However, Fontaine is an entirely new region. There are specific puzzles and monsters that are countered by Ousia Damage. Lynette's elemental skill deals a small instance of Ousia damage with a 10-second cooldown, and so far, I found that the new double dancing robot world boss, if the fight goes on for a very long time, Lynette's Ousia poke will remove its cryo shield. Lynette at the moment is the only character in the game that deals Ousia damage, and when we start seeing monsters that are countered by Ousia damage in Abyss 12, Lynette being a general usage Anemo character will be able to contribute and help counter specific enemy mechanics. Let's next talk about Lynette's teams. I'm going to make this section really quick. For any team that uses Kazuha or Sucrose, you can still use a Constellation 0 Lynette instead. For example, there's no reason why you can't use Lynette in a Linny Monopyro team. There's also no reason why you can't use Lynette in an international team, a freeze team, etc, etc. However, Kazuha and Sucrose both amplify damage much more than Lynette does, and Kazuha has insane grouping and Sucrose has decent grouping. So why would you ever use a Constellation 0 Lynette over Kazuha or Sucrose? Well, it's simple. Let's say the top variation of Abyss 12 has the Dancing Robot Duo, and they get their Cryo Shield up pretty early on in the fight. It's likely that because Lynette can instantly remove that shield in comparison to Kazuha or Sucrose, she'll actually be a better option for that one specific fight. This applies to other monsters as well, of course, so as the enemies shift more towards Ousia weak enemies, then there will indeed be a reason to use Lynette over Kazuha and Sucrose. However, Lynette also has an issue of really only being able to easily hit one enemy with her elemental skill most of the time, although if the enemies are super close together, Lynette might be able to hit both of them with her elemental skill and deal Ousia damage to multiple enemies. But for the most part, her Ousia damage is mainly reserved against a single target and once every 10 seconds. So yeah, if you can't tell, Lynette is at the moment, honestly, overall a downgrade to Kazuha and Sucrose, especially at Constellation 0. The tiny attack buff she provides is not comparable to the massive elemental damage buff from Kazuha, or the Thrilling Tales plus elemental mastery buff from Sucrose. Also, I had high hopes for her Constellation 1, but even with this level 90 Lynette, I can't even notice it. You can actually see a very tiny little vortex, but it's not able to group up even these treasure hoarders in the slightest. Now, Lynette is fortunately still an Anemo character and she has good frame data. As such, she's a fast and pragmatic, free-to-play swirler for the Viridescent Veneer. And the fact that she's Anemo, she's great for overworld exploration thanks to Anemo Resonance and her skill, which is a bit faster than regular running. But I more so wanted to talk about the precedent that Lynette sets for the future. With new enemy mechanics being countered by Ousia damage, Lynette's niche lies entirely in being able to do Ousia damage and being Anemo. We might see future 4-star Fontaine characters be strictly downgrades in comparison to the existing cast, but able to counter specific boss mechanics. Personally, I'm not thrilled about this direction in 4-star character design and would like for new ones to honestly be equally strong to the old 4-stars without only relying on countering a specific boss mechanic. Anyway, Lynette is still a very perfectly usable, completely free 4-star Anemo character. Providing just a smaller damage buff in comparison to Sucrose or Kazuha honestly isn't a reason not to use Lynette, especially if you just like her as a character. Let me know what you think about Lynette down in the comments below, as well as the precedent that Ousia damage is setting for the future. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.